stop everything you're doing right now. What I'm about to share changed Joel Goldsmith's entire understanding of spiritual reality. This single illumination transformed him from a struggling businessman into one of the most powerful mystical healers of our time. The revelation came during his deepest despair. Joel was financially ruined, his health failing, conventional medicine offering no hope. In that moment of complete surrender, something extraordinary happened. A voice within spoke words that would revolutionize his entire existence. That inner voice revealed the most profound secret about your divine nature. It's not what you think, not what you've been taught, and certainly not what religious institutions have told you. This truth lies dormant within you right now, waiting for recognition. The voice told Joel something that shattered every limiting belief he'd ever held about himself and God. It said, "You are not seeking God. God is seeking expression as you." Do you understand the revolutionary power of this statement? You are not a human being having a spiritual experience. You are a spiritual being having a human experience, but even deeper than that. You are God individualized, expressing divine consciousness through the vehicle of your human form. This isn't blasphemy or New Age fantasy. This is the fundamental truth of your being that Joel discovered. Most people spend their entire lives trying to reach God, to become worthy, to earn divine love. But Joel realized you don't need to become anything. You already are everything you seek. The kingdom of heaven isn't coming. It's already here, expressing as your very consciousness. This illumination didn't come through years of study or meditation practices. It arrived in an instant of pure recognition. Joel described it as the most natural thing in the world, like remembering something you'd temporarily forgotten. The moment you truly grasp this, everything changes. Your problems aren't solved by fixing external circumstances. They dissolve when you recognize your true identity as divine consciousness itself. Disease, lack, limitation, fear. These are all based on the mistaken belief that you are separate from your source. But here's what Joel discovered that most spiritual seekers miss. You can't think your way into this realization. You can't affirm it or visualize it into existence. This recognition happens in the silence beyond thought, in the space where you simply are, without trying to become anything. The practical implications of Joel's illumination are staggering. When you truly know yourself as divine consciousness, your word becomes law in your experience. Not because you're manipulating energy or forcing outcomes, but because you're no longer creating from the level of separated human will. Joel learned to heal through this recognition. He didn't send healing energy or perform treatments. He simply rested in the awareness of wholeness that was already present. From this consciousness, seemingly miraculous transformations occurred naturally and effortlessly. This isn't about positive thinking or spiritual techniques. This is about recognizing what you already are and have always been. The moment this recognition dawns, you'll understand why Joel called it the most important discovery a human being can make about their true nature. Let me tell you about Margaret, a woman who attended one of Joel's classes in the 1950s. She had been suffering from what doctors called an incurable heart condition. Multiple specialists had given her months to live. She came to Joel not seeking a healing, but seeking understanding. During their conversation, Joel didn't pray for her or perform any healing ritual. Instead, he simply rested in the recognition of her true nature as perfect, eternal consciousness. He saw through the appearance of disease to the reality of her divine being. Within moments, Margaret felt something shift inside her. Not a physical sensation, but a recognition. She suddenly knew with absolute certainty that she was not her body, not her condition, not her medical prognosis. She was something far greater, something that could never be diminished or destroyed. When she returned to her doctor the following week, all traces of heart disease had disappeared. But more importantly, Margaret had awakened to her true identity. The physical healing was simply the natural result of this spiritual recognition. Then there was Robert, a businessman facing bankruptcy and family crisis. Everything he had worked for was crumbling around him. He sought Joel's help, expecting practical advice or spiritual techniques to change his circumstances. Instead, Joel shared the same illumination he had received years earlier. He helped Robert recognize that his true identity as consciousness was completely untouched by external circumstances. The divine being that Robert truly was lacked nothing and feared nothing. This recognition didn't happen overnight for Robert. It took several weeks of contemplating his true nature before the understanding deepened. But as it did, opportunities began appearing seemingly from nowhere. Solutions presented themselves naturally, without struggle or manipulation. Within 3 months, Robert's business had not only recovered but expanded beyond his previous success. His family relationships healed. But the real transformation was internal. The recognition that he was not at the mercy of external conditions, but was the very consciousness in which all conditions appeared. Sarah's story demonstrates how this illumination works even in the most challenging circumstances. She had lost her teenage son in a tragic accident and was consumed by grief and anger. No amount of counseling or spiritual comfort seemed to touch her pain. When she met Joel, she was angry at God, at life, at everyone who tried to help her. Joel didn't offer sympathy or explanations. Instead, he sat in silence with her, resting in the recognition of what she truly was beneath all the pain and confusion. Gradually, Sarah began to sense something beyond her grief. Not a replacement for her love for her son, but a deeper recognition of the eternal nature of consciousness itself. She began to understand that neither she nor her son were merely physical beings subject to death and separation. The grief didn't disappear, but it transformed. Sarah recognized that love itself is the eternal substance of consciousness, and that the bond with her son existed in a realm beyond physical form. This understanding brought not just comfort, but a profound awakening to her own divine nature. These transformations weren't miracles in the supernatural sense. They were natural results of recognizing what Joel called the truth of being. When you truly understand your nature as divine consciousness, your entire experience of life aligns with this reality. The key insight Joel received was that you don't need to acquire divinity, develop it, or earn it. You simply need to recognize what you already are. This recognition is available to you right now, in this moment, as you hear these words. The question isn't whether you're capable of this awakening. The question is whether you're willing to let go of the limited identity you've been carrying and recognize the magnificent being you truly are. This recognition is your birthright, your natural inheritance. If these transformation stories inspire you, like this video to help others find these teachings, subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment. What healing journey resonated most with you? Beyond this fundamental recognition, Joel discovered specific ways to deepen and stabilize this awareness in daily life. The first technique he called the practice of the presence. This isn't about thinking about God or trying to feel spiritual. It's about resting in the awareness that is your true nature. Throughout your day, pause frequently and simply be aware that you are aware. Don't analyze this awareness or try to improve it. Simply rest in the recognition that this consciousness you are is the same divine consciousness that creates and sustains all life. When challenges arise, instead of immediately trying to solve them on the human level, first return to this recognition. Ask yourself, what would the divine consciousness that I am know about this situation? Then listen in the silence beyond thought for guidance that comes naturally. This practice gradually shifts your entire approach to life. Instead of living as a limited human trying to manage circumstances, you begin to live as consciousness itself, naturally expressing wisdom, love, and creative solutions through your human experience. Joel also taught what he called the art of spiritual discernment. This is the ability to distinguish between appearances and reality, between what seems to be happening and what is actually true from the perspective of divine consciousness. When you're faced with any form of limitation, disease, or lack, Joel taught to recognize these as appearances in consciousness rather than ultimate reality. This doesn't mean denying what you see or feel, but recognizing that your true nature as consciousness is greater than any condition. Practice seeing through appearances to the underlying perfection that is always present. When someone appears angry, see through to the peace that is their true nature. When circumstances appear chaotic, rest in the order and harmony that consciousness naturally expresses. This discernment develops gradually but transforms your entire perception of life. You begin to live from truth rather than reacting to appearances. This shift in perception often results in what others call miraculous changes in your external experience. Another powerful technique Joel taught was treatment through recognition. This isn't about sending healing thoughts or trying to change anything. It's about recognizing the spiritual truth about any situation and resting in that recognition until it becomes your dominant awareness. If someone asks for help with a health challenge, don't focus on the disease or try to mentally fight it. Instead, recognize the perfect spiritual being that they truly are. See through their temporary physical experience to their eternal nature as divine consciousness. Hold this recognition steadily, not as a mental exercise, but as a deep knowing. Allow this truth to permeate your consciousness until you feel the certainty of it. Often, this recognition in consciousness manifests as healing in their physical experience. The same principle applies to financial lack, relationship problems, or any other challenge. First, recognize the spiritual truth, then rest in that recognition until it becomes more real to you than the appearance. This is the foundation of all effective spiritual practice. Joel's most advanced teaching was what he called living from the standpoint of Christhood. This means recognizing not just your own divine nature, but the divine nature of everyone and everything you encounter throughout your day. When you meet someone, silently acknowledge the Christ presence that they are, regardless of their human behavior or appearance. When you face any situation, recognize the divine intelligence that is present as the very substance of that situation, waiting to reveal perfect action. This practice transforms you into a transparency for divine love and wisdom. You become a beneficial presence wherever you go, not through what you do, but through what you recognize and are. This is the secret of Joel's remarkable healing work. As this recognition deepens, you discover that you're not just awakening to your own divinity. You're becoming an instrument through which the divine consciousness awakens to itself in every person and situation you encounter. But let's be honest about the challenges you'll face in integrating this understanding. The most common obstacle is the tendency to try to use spiritual truth to improve your human experience, rather than recognizing your divine identity completely. You might find yourself thinking, if I'm divine consciousness, why haven't my problems disappeared instantly? This question itself reveals you're still thinking from the level of separated human consciousness, trying to use spiritual power rather than recognizing what you are. The ego mind will resist this recognition because it threatens its very existence. You may experience periods of doubt, confusion, or even increased challenges as old patterns surface to be released. This is normal and temporary. Joel experienced this too. Even after his initial illumination, he went through periods where the old sense of limitation seemed to return. But he learned that these experiences were actually opportunities to deepen his recognition of truth and strengthen his identity as consciousness itself. Another challenge is the tendency to make this recognition into another spiritual technique or practice, rather than understanding it as the recognition of what you already are. You might catch yourself trying to become divine consciousness instead of recognizing that you already are it. This creates spiritual effort and strain, which actually moves you away from the natural recognition Joel discovered. The moment you're trying to achieve this awareness, you're operating from the assumption that you don't already have it, which perpetuates the very illusion you're trying to overcome. The solution is to repeatedly return to the simple recognition that you are consciousness itself, right now, exactly as you are. Not consciousness that needs to be improved, developed, or purified, but consciousness that is already perfect, complete, and whole. When you notice yourself striving or trying to become something, gently return to the awareness of what you already are. This isn't a practice you do. It's a recognition of what you've never stopped being, even when you forgot it temporarily. Joel also warned about the tendency to use this understanding to judge or condemn others who haven't yet awakened to their true nature. You might find yourself thinking, if they only knew who they really are, they wouldn't behave that way. This judgment actually reveals you're still thinking dualistically, dividing people into awakened and unawakened, spiritual and unspiritual. But from the consciousness that you are, there is only one being appearing as many. Only one consciousness expressing through infinite forms. When you encounter someone whose behavior challenges you, This is an opportunity to deepen your own recognition. Can you see through their temporary human expression to the divine being they truly are? Can you hold this recognition steadily regardless of their actions? This practice not only prevents spiritual pride, but actually becomes a powerful form of service. When you consistently recognize the truth about others, you become a healing presence that can awaken them to their own divine nature through the power of recognition itself. The final challenge is maintaining this recognition in the face of collective human beliefs and societal conditioning. You live in a world that constantly reinforces the illusion of separation, limitation, and powerlessness. This collective hypnosis can be overwhelming at times. Joel taught that you must become like a lion among sheep, maintaining your recognition of truth regardless of what the majority believes or experiences. This doesn't mean isolating yourself or judging the world, but it does mean anchoring yourself so deeply in truth that external appearances can't shake your recognition. Develop what Joel called the conviction of truth. This is an unshakable knowing of your divine nature that remains steady regardless of circumstances. This conviction grows stronger each time you choose recognition over reaction, truth over appearance. Remember that every challenge is actually an opportunity to deepen this recognition. The circumstances that seem to contradict your divine nature are the perfect laboratories for strengthening your understanding of what you truly are beneath all appearances. If these challenge-breaking techniques speak to your heart, like to support this content, subscribe for advanced spiritual practices, and comment, which obstacle are you ready to transform now? Now let me share how this recognition integrates into the practical aspects of daily living. Joel discovered that awakening to your divinity doesn't remove you from human experience, but transforms how you move through it. You become divinity in human form, expressing through ordinary activities. In your work life, you begin to operate from inspired action rather than forced effort. Solutions appear naturally because you're no longer trying to manipulate outcomes from limited human thinking. You become a channel for divine intelligence to express practical wisdom. In relationships, you see through personality conflicts to the divine being in each person. This doesn't mean accepting abusive behavior, but it means responding from love and wisdom rather than reacting from hurt or fear. Your recognition of truth in others often awakens their recognition of it in themselves. Even mundane activities like shopping, driving, or household chores become opportunities to practice the presence of your divine nature. You discover that consciousness can express itself perfectly through any activity when you're not resisting your human experience. Joel's advanced students learn to live in what he called the double-threaded existence, simultaneously aware of their divine nature and fully engaged with their human responsibilities. This isn't about compartmentalizing spirituality into certain times or places. Your divine consciousness is present in business meetings, family dinners, and quiet meditation equally. The key is maintaining the recognition of what you are while engaging whatever activity is present. This creates a life of continuous spiritual practice without withdrawal from worldly engagement. When conflicts arise in relationships or work situations, you learn to pause and remember your true identity before responding. This pause allows divine wisdom to inform your human actions, often resulting in solutions that serve everyone involved in ways the human mind couldn't have conceived. This integration process takes time and patience. You're literally rewiring lifelong patterns of thinking and reacting. But each time you choose recognition over reaction, you strengthen your natural tendency to live from your divine nature rather than your conditioned personality. One of Joel's students, a surgeon named Dr. Williams, exemplifies this integration beautifully. He learned to begin each operation by recognizing the perfect spiritual being of his patient and the divine intelligence present as his own hands and mind during surgery. This wasn't about abandoning medical training or relying on wishful thinking. Rather, it was about bringing the recognition of spiritual perfection into the practical application of medical knowledge. His surgical outcomes improved dramatically, and patients often reported unusually comfortable recoveries. Dr. Williams discovered that recognizing spiritual truth enhanced rather than replaced professional competence. The divine consciousness that he was naturally expressed itself through his trained abilities, creating a synergy between spiritual awareness and practical skill. This same principle applies to your life. Whether you're a parent, teacher, artist, or business owner, your recognition of divine consciousness enhances your human abilities rather than diminishing them. You become increasingly effective in the world while remaining rooted in spiritual truth. Another student, Maria, applied these principles to financial challenges. Instead of focusing on lack or struggling to manifest abundance, she recognized her true nature as consciousness itself, which lacks nothing and creates effortlessly through inspiration rather than desperation. Maria stopped trying to get money and started recognizing herself as the consciousness in which all abundance appears. She asked not, "How can I make more money?" but, "How does divine consciousness express abundance through this human experience I call Maria?" This shift led to a complete transformation of her relationship with money and work. Opportunities began appearing naturally, creative ideas flowed easily, and she found herself guided to actions that resulted in financial prosperity without the stress and struggle she had previously experienced. The key was recognizing that consciousness itself is the source of all supply, and since she was consciousness, she was never separate from the source of everything she could ever need. This understanding transformed scarcity thinking into natural abundance expression. As this recognition deepens over time, you begin to experience what Joel called the mystical marriage, the complete integration of your divine nature with your human expression. You no longer feel like you're playing a role or trying to be spiritual. You simply are what you are, naturally. This integration brings a profound peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. You remain engaged with life but no longer driven by compulsive needs or fears. You begin to move through life with the grace and wisdom that is your natural inheritance as consciousness itself. Challenges still appear, but your relationship to them transforms completely. Instead of problems that threaten your well-being, they become opportunities for consciousness to express creative solutions. Instead of personal burdens, they become impersonal appearances that consciousness dissolves through recognition. You discover that your human life becomes an instrument through which the divine expresses love, wisdom, and creativity in the world. This isn't about becoming special or superior to others. It's about recognizing the magnificent being you've always been beneath the temporary patterns of personality and conditioning. The ripple effects of this recognition extend far beyond your personal experience. Joel discovered that when you consistently live from the recognition of your divine nature, you become what he called a lamp unto the world, a beneficial presence that awakens others to their own truth. People are drawn to the peace and authenticity that naturally radiates from someone who has recognized their true identity. You don't need to preach or try to convince anyone of spiritual truths. Your very presence becomes a transmission of the recognition you've realized. Children especially respond to this authentic spiritual presence. They naturally recognize truth because they haven't yet been fully conditioned into the illusion of separation. Your recognition of their divine nature often helps them maintain their natural spiritual awareness as they grow. Even those who seem completely absorbed in material concerns are touched by genuine spiritual presence. The divine being that they truly are recognizes itself in you, even when their personality isn't consciously aware of this recognition. Joel's final teaching was that this awakening to your divinity is not the end of your spiritual journey, but the beginning of an entirely new way of existing. You begin to understand that consciousness is infinitely creative and always expanding into new expressions of love and wisdom. Your individual awakening becomes a contribution to the collective awakening of humanity. Every person who recognizes their divine nature makes it easier for others to recognize theirs. You become part of the solution to humanity's fundamental confusion about its true identity. This doesn't mean you become a teacher or healer in the formal sense, though you might be guided in that direction. It means that whatever your life expression, it becomes infused with the recognition of truth and naturally serves the highest good of all. You realize that consciousness itself is using your human experience to awaken to its own infinite nature. You are not separate from this process, but are consciousness itself, exploring its own creative potential through the adventure of human existence. The illumination that transformed Joel Goldsmith's life is available to you right now. Not tomorrow, not after years of practice, not when you become more worthy or spiritual. Right now, in this moment, you can recognize the divine consciousness that you are and have always been. This recognition doesn't require belief, faith, or understanding. It requires only the willingness to stop identifying yourself as a limited human being and recognize yourself as the consciousness in which all experience appears. This is your true nature, your eternal identity. As you integrate this recognition into daily living, you'll discover that life becomes an increasingly beautiful expression of divine creativity. Challenges transform into opportunities, relationships deepen into genuine love, and your entire experience becomes a celebration of the magnificent being you truly are. The kingdom of heaven isn't a place you go to after death or a state you achieve through spiritual practice. It's the recognition of what you are right now, the consciousness reading these words, the awareness that is your most intimate reality. If your spiritual understanding expanded through these Joel Goldsmith secrets, like this video, subscribe for more transformative teachings, and comment, "I am transformed," to confirm your new path.
My friends, let us come together in a spirit of quietness. Let us come with no desire to change the world, no attempt to rearrange outer circumstances, but simply with a willingness to listen deeply, silently to the presence that is always here. For the spiritual life does not begin in words, in books, or in human reasoning. It begins in that sacred moment when we withdraw attention from the outer scene and become aware of a presence that is closer than breathing, nearer than hands and feet. In this stillness, something begins to stir, something ancient, something eternal, something that has always been the very life of our being. It is from this place that all true spiritual demonstration flows. You see, we have been trained by the world to believe that results are achieved through effort, through strong will, through emotional intensity, through striving and pleading and struggling. But in the spiritual life, nothing of this sort is required. In fact, the more strenuous the effort, the further we are from the realization of truth. For spiritual demonstration is not the effect of human power. It is the expression of divine presence realized. All harmony, all healing, all peace, all supply, all protection, these do not come from the outside, nor do they respond to the push and pull of human desire. They unfold from within, like a flower opening in the morning light, not because it is forced, but because it is in the nature of life to reveal its own beauty. So let us understand this first principle. God is the only presence, the only power, the only law, and the only reality. And where God is recognized, harmony must appear not as a miracle in the human sense, not as the violation of natural law, but as the fulfillment of spiritual law. When Jesus healed, when he fed the multitude, when he stilled the waters, he did not perform these acts as a man gifted with supernatural abilities. He did not call upon powers unknown to others. He simply rested in the realization of one presence, one power, one life. And in that realization, discord could not maintain its claim. There is no struggle in the presence of one. There is no conflict where only God is. There is no disease where spirit alone is the life of being. What the world calls miracle is merely the human mind witnessing the natural activity of divine law. This activity is universal. It is impartial. It is ever present. It is not dependent upon your worthiness, nor does it require the approval of any person, creed, or institution. It flows wherever. It is recognized just as the sun pours its light through any window that is opened. This is why our work, from the very first moment of spiritual practice, is not to acquire anything from God, not health, not supply, not guidance, not protection. The moment we attempt to get something, we have placed ourselves outside the realization of the infinite. You cannot add God to your life. You cannot bring God into a situation. You cannot call God into a need. God already is. Our task is simply to recognize what is already present, to rest in it, to become quiet enough to feel its activity within the sanctuary of our own being. And as we do, something remarkable happens, not by human design, but by the nature of divine completeness. Outer conditions begin to reshape themselves in accordance with the inner realization, not because we asked, but because we understood. So in this first moment of our time together, let us lay down all the burdens we have carried, every attempt to fix, to change, to improve. Let us release the belief that something is missing, that something must be achieved, that something must be obtained from outside ourselves. None of this is required. Let us rest in the assurance that spiritual demonstration is the natural expression of the presence that lives itself as us. And as we proceed, let us do so with a quiet confidence that where the realization of God is, harmony must be, that where the consciousness of one is, fear dissolves, that where the presence is acknowledged, its activity becomes visible. This is the beginning of our journey into the secret law behind every so-called miracle, a law that is not hidden from us, but revealed in every moment of silence, every moment of inner listening, every moment in which we become still enough to feel the movement of spirit. And now we continue with hearts open and minds quiet into the next unfoldment of this truth. Let us continue now quietly, gently, with the same stillness that began our meditation. For spiritual truth cannot be grasped through a racing mind or an anxious heart. It must be approached as one approaches a holy presence, softly, reverently, as though stepping into sacred ground. In this portion of our work, we turn to one of the great foundations of spiritual living, the principle that God is the only cause. Now, this is not a statement to be accepted intellectually or repeated as a formula. It is a revelation that must dawn within the depth of consciousness. For when the truth of it is realized, even for a moment, the entire structure of fear begins to dissolve. You see, the human mind is conditioned from birth to believe in many powers, many forces, many causes at work in our lives, health and disease, abundance and lack, good fortune and misfortune, heredity, climate, chance, the will of others, the forces of nature, even the passage of time. But none of these, absolutely none of these, has any spiritual power. There is only one cause, and that cause is God. When you let this principle sink deeply into your awareness, not as an idea, but as an inner realization, you begin to experience a freedom that the world cannot give. You begin to see that nothing external can enter your life to enrich it, and nothing external can diminish it. For there is no external. There is only God expressed as individual being. Goldsmith would often put it this way: all that God is, you are. All that God has is yours, not by attainment, but by inheritance. The activity of God as your consciousness is the only law operating in your experience. Let this be clear. God does not stand outside your life, governing it from afar. God is not a being who sends blessings or withholds them. God is not the cause of good events, while something else is the cause of adversity. God is not one of many powers. God is the one power. Therefore, the moment you accept two powers, even subtly, you step out of the Christ consciousness and into the realm of fear. The belief in two powers is the root of all discord. It is the foundation of anxiety. It is the parent of suffering. For if there are two powers, at any moment one of them may act against you. But in the realization of one, fear has no ground on which to stand. Think for a moment. If God is the only cause, then what is the cause of disease? What is the cause of lack? What is the cause of conflict or confusion? These are not effects produced by a real power. They arise from a belief, a mental image accepted as reality by the human mind. They have no spiritual law to sustain them. They have no source in God. They have no permanence, no authority, no substance. They are shadows, nothing more. To attempt to fight them, resist them, or correct them is to grant them a reality they do not possess. This is why Jesus never struggled with conditions. He never treated disease as a substance, lack as a force, or fear as an entity. He simply recognized the truth that God alone is cause, and everything unlike God has no actual existence in the realm of spirit. And so harmony appeared not because he made it happen, but because his consciousness allowed nothing else. Now, this principle does not deny that human beings may experience pain, suffering, or lack. It does not require you to pretend that your difficulties don't exist. What it does ask is this: do not look to the problem for its cause. Do not try to correct the effect. Do not attempt to manipulate conditions. Turn instead to the source. Turn within. For God is the only cause, and therefore God is the cause of all true being, all harmony, all completeness, all joy. When we rest in this recognition, when we withdraw attention from secondary causes and behold one, the appearance begins to shift, not by our effort, but by the law of our being. Think of a lamp surrounded by shadows. You need not chase the shadows, nor do you need to fight them. Simply light the lamp. The shadows dissolve of their own accord, for they were never something in themselves. So it is with the appearances of discord. They vanish in the presence of realized truth. And so, as we begin the deeper portion of this spiritual journey, let us carry this principle in our hearts. There is one cause, one presence, one power, one life, and that one is God, forever expressing itself in and as the individual. Nothing external can add to that. Nothing external can subtract from it. Your life is governed not by persons, conditions, or circumstances, but by the infinite that formed you of its own substance. As we continue into the next section of our unfolding, we will see how Jesus lived this truth, how he worked with it, and how this same consciousness becomes the foundation of all spiritual demonstration. Let us now turn our attention to the Master Jesus, whose life was the purest demonstration of the truth we have been contemplating. For Jesus did not come merely to perform wonders, nor to establish doctrines, nor to create a new religion. He came to reveal the nature of God as the very essence of individual being, and to show how this realization operates as harmony, healing, and freedom. When Jesus walked the earth, he did so with a singular consciousness. There is but one presence, one power, one life, and that life is the Father within me. He lived in the uninterrupted awareness of God as the only cause, and in that awareness, nothing unlike God could maintain itself. Observe carefully how he approached every situation, always from the standpoint of, 1, when confronted with disease, he never fought it. When he stood before lack, he never sought supply. When fear surrounded him, he never resisted it. When faced with danger, he never attempted to protect himself. Instead, he lifted his consciousness above the appearance and rested wholly in the truth. The Father within me doeth the works. Let us now turn our attention to the Master Jesus, whose life was the purest demonstration of the truth we have been contemplating. For Jesus did not come merely to perform wonders, nor to establish doctrines, nor to create a new religion. He came to reveal the nature of God as the very essence of individual being, and to show how this realization operates as harmony, healing, and freedom. And this is why Jesus could say, with utter simplicity, I can of mine own self do nothing. He recognized the nothingness of personal selfhood and the allness of God. He acknowledged that all power belongs to the invisible, not to form, not to matter, not to the condition, not even to the person. And so, when a man came to Jesus pleading for healing, Jesus did not search for a technique or a method. He did not inquire into symptoms or histories. He did not weigh the severity of the condition. He simply looked beyond the appearance to the spiritual truth of the individual's being. He saw God there. He saw the completeness of the Father made manifest. He saw the Christ hidden from human sight, but fully present in reality. This seeing was the healing. For when you behold the truth of another, you unveil that truth in your own consciousness, and what is realized within is revealed without. Jesus never tried to change the outer picture. He corrected the inner vision, and as the vision changed, the picture changed, not by effort, but by law. Consider the multiplication of the loaves and fishes. The human mind saw only scarcity. But Jesus lifted his eyes, meaning he raised his consciousness to the realization of omnipresence, and in that recognition, the illusion of limitation dissolved. Consider the storm on the sea. The disciples saw danger. Jesus saw God. And in the consciousness of the one, the appearance of discord subsided, for there was no power to sustain it. Consider the raising of Lazarus. Others saw death as a power. Jesus saw only life as the substance and law of being. His declaration, "I am the resurrection and the life," was not an affirmation of personal capacity. It was the recognition of divine activity present in that very moment. In every instance, his approach was the same. Lift consciousness above the appearance into the truth of God's allness, and let that truth reveal itself as harmony. There is no magic in this. There is no favoritism. There is no supernatural intervention. There is only the functioning of spiritual law. Now, it is important to understand that Jesus never intended to be worshipped as an exception. He came as an example. He came to show that what he did, we also may do not through personal power, but through the same realization of the one. "The Father within me doeth the works" is not a statement about Jesus alone. It is the spiritual truth of every individual. The difference is not in the presence, but in the degree of realization. And so, as we study how Jesus worked with the law, we are not learning how to imitate acts. We are learning how to enter the consciousness from which those acts flowed. The Master lived in constant recognition of one presence, one power, one cause, one life, one selfhood, one law, and wherever the consciousness of one is, harmony must appear, for there is nothing to oppose it. In our next unfolding, we will look more deeply at how this recognition enables us to see through the world of appearances the foundation of Christ consciousness and the essence of spiritual healing. Let us go deeper now, quietly, without hurry, for this next step is one of the most essential in all spiritual unfoldment. It is the very heart of the Christ message and the living center of every spiritual demonstration in the infinite way. We have spoken of God as the only cause, the only law, the only presence. Now we must understand how this truth operates through our consciousness and how it dissolves the illusion of discord, limitation, and fear. The Master said, "Judge not according to appearances." In those few words, he revealed the key to spiritual vision. For every discord, every condition of lack, every form of disease, every moment of fear is nothing more than an appearance, a mental picture arising from the world belief in separation. It is not the reality of God's creation, nor does it have spiritual substance, power, or law to sustain it. To the human sense, this world of appearances seems solid, authoritative, and unyielding. But to the spiritual consciousness, it is as transient as a shadow cast by a passing cloud. The appearance is not the reality. The reality is always God expressing itself as wholeness, harmony, and perfection. This is why Jesus could look upon the sick, the sinful, the poor, the fearful, and behold something entirely different from what the world was seeing. He did not accept the picture presented to the senses. He saw through it, saw beyond it, into the invisible truth of being. And that seeing itself was the healing, not the words, not the touch, not the act, but the seeing. For Christ consciousness is the capacity to behold God where the human mind perceives imperfection. It is the inner knowing that rejects the testimony of the senses and abides steadfastly in the realization of the one presence. Now, this is not accomplished by effort. We do not force ourselves to believe something different from what we observe. We do not mentally declare perfection over imperfection, nor do we attempt to superimpose a spiritual truth upon a physical picture. Such practices merely engage the human mind, and the human mind cannot perceive spirit. Seeing through appearance is an act of grace, an inner shift of vision, a quiet recognition of the invisible. It is a spiritual discernment that comes when the mind grows still enough to let the presence reveal itself. You see, when you look at a person or a condition with the human sense of sight, you behold only form, flesh, behavior, circumstances, symptoms. But when the inner eye opens the single eye of spiritual vision, you behold the Christ, the real identity, untouched by appearance. And as you behold that truth, you bear witness to God's activity, and the appearance begins to yield. Not because you fought it, not because you demanded its change, but because you saw through it. To see through appearance is to stand in the realization that nothing exists apart from God. It is to know that every individual is the expression of the one life. It is to understand that no condition has the power to alter the nature of God's creation. In this state of consciousness, harmony is not created, it is revealed. Peace is not attained, it is uncovered. Healing is not brought about, it is realized. Let us understand this well. We do not heal disease. We do not correct lack. We do not fix broken conditions. These belong to the world of appearance, and the world of appearance is not the reality of spirit. We simply lift our vision above appearance until we behold the truth that was there from the beginning. And it is this inner beholding that dissolves the illusion, just as the rising sun dissolves the darkness without ever battling it. As you grow in this realization, you will find that your concerns with outer conditions diminish. You will begin to perceive that everything which comes to your attention does so only to give you the opportunity to look beyond it, to witness the operation of spiritual law in the face of human belief. Every appearance becomes an invitation to behold the Christ. We simply lift our vision above appearance until we behold the truth that was there from the beginning. The miracle occurs not when outward conditions change, but when we are no longer hypnotized by appearance, when we behold the invisible reality that was always present. This is the essence of Christ consciousness. This is the secret behind spiritual demonstration. This is the foundation upon which Jesus built his entire ministry. And in our next unfolding, we will explore how to enter the inner stillness from which this vision becomes possible, how to quiet the mind, open the heart, and let the presence reveal itself without effort. Let us move gently now into the heart of our practice, the sacred work of entering inner stillness. For all the principles we have spoken of thus far, one presence, one power, the unreality of appearance, the Christ vision, are known only in silence. They are not apprehended through thinking, nor through study, nor through argument. They are revealed in quietness. When the appearance is discord, it invites you to see harmony. When the appearance is lack, it invites you to see abundance. When the appearance is disease, it invites you to see wholeness. When the appearance is fear, it invites you to see the presence that casts out fear. And when the appearance is sin, it invites you to see innocence, the purity of God expressed as individual being. This silence is not something you create. It is something you sink into. It is already here, beneath the noise of thought, beneath the turbulence of emotion, beneath the agitation of the human mind. It is your natural state, your spiritual home, the abiding place of the presence. You will notice that every great spiritual teacher, every prophet, every mystic, every enlightened soul has spoken of the necessity of silence. Not the silence that is merely the absence of sound, but the silence that is the absence of mental activity, the stillness in which the ego loses its voice and the spirit gains its hearing. And this is the essence of the infinite way meditation. Not a doing, but an allowing. Not a seeking, but a resting. Not an effort to reach God, but an openness to let God reveal himself as your very being. Goldsmith would often say, "Be still and let the presence announce itself." There is no technique that brings God closer, for God is already the life of your life, the mind of your mind, the breath of your breath. The purpose of meditation is not to draw God near, but to remove the veil of mental noise that prevents you from feeling what is eternally present. So, when you enter stillness, do not begin by asking for anything. Do not attempt to solve a problem. Do not attempt to get guidance, healing, or supply. The moment you attempt to get something, the mind becomes active and you remain at the surface of consciousness. Instead, come as you are, quietly, humbly, without ambition, without desire, simply to rest in the presence. You may begin by closing your eyes, letting the world fade from your senses, breathing gently, without effort, and turning your attention inward. You are not trying to think of God. You are not trying to visualize God. You are not trying to repeat sacred words. All of these keep the mind active. Instead, you simply become receptive to the invisible. If thoughts arise, and they will, do not fight them. Do not chase them away. Let them come. Let them go, like clouds passing across the sky. Your task is not to resist thought, but to stop following it. And in that gentle refusal to follow thought, a space opens. A stillness is felt. A presence begins to stir, not as a sensation, not as an emotion, but as a subtle awareness of peace. You may begin by closing your eyes, letting the world fade from your senses, breathing gently, without effort, and turning your attention inward. Instead, you simply become receptive to the invisible. Perhaps you cannot describe it. Perhaps you cannot grasp it with words, but it is there, quiet, tender, alive. Now, do not attempt to hold it. Do not attempt to deepen it. Do not attempt to keep it. Simply rest in it. Rest without effort. In this stillness, no problem exists. No fear exists. No lack exists. For the presence itself is harmony, wholeness, and completeness. If you linger here, even briefly, you will feel the I, the divine I, taking precedence over the personal sense of self. And in that sacred exchange, the personal I fades into the background, and the infinite I, the presence, comes forward. This is the secret of spiritual demonstration. If you linger here, even briefly, you will feel the I, the divine I, taking precedence over the personal sense of self. And in that sacred exchange, the personal I fades into the background, and the infinite I, the presence, comes forward. If you enter this silence daily, even briefly, even imperfectly, even with a mind that wanders, you will discover that something in you grows deeper, quieter, more anchored. The world will begin to lose its power. Fear will diminish, the sense of separation will dissolve, and the presence will become the unnoticed companion of every moment. For the ultimate purpose of meditation is not to experience something during the meditation period, but to carry the atmosphere of stillness into your daily life, to live from a place where the mind is no longer the master, but the servant, where the presence leads and you follow. This is the threshold where the spiritual life truly begins. And in the next unfolding, we will see how, from this state of inner recognition, the law of harmony flows naturally. Where presence is acknowledged, presence becomes visible. And now, my friends, having entered that sacred stillness where the presence announces itself, we come to the heart of spiritual demonstration. Where the presence is recognized, harmony must flow. This is not a poetic statement. It is not an idealistic hope. It is a spiritual law, as dependable as gravity, as certain as the rising of the sun, a law that operates not because we believe in it, but because it is the nature of God to express itself as harmony wherever it is realized. You see, the presence is always here. It fills all space. It animates all life. It is the substance of all being. But it becomes effective in our experience only at the point of recognition, not because God has withheld anything, not because God responds only when we call, but because the human mind, absorbed in the world of appearances, lives unaware of the very life that sustains it. Recognition opens the window. Grace shines through. You need not ask it to shine. You need not command it. You need not urge it into action. It is already shining. You have simply removed the veil. Let us understand this clearly. As long as you look to the outer scene for cause, you remain bound to the appearance. But the moment you turn inward and recognize one presence, the appearance begins to yield to reality. This is the spiritual law. Harmony is not created by thought. It is not manufactured by prayer. It is not earned through effort. It is not the reward of faith. It is the inevitable expression of God realized. Imagine for a moment a room that has been dark for years. You do not fight the darkness. You do not wrestle with it. You do not reason with it. You do not pray it away. You simply open the blinds. The light enters, not because you forced it, but because light is the nature of the sun. So it is with spiritual harmony. It enters the moment recognition opens the inner blinds, and the darkness, disease, fear, lack, confusion disappears of its own accord. You did not conquer it. You did not overpower it. You did not heal it. It simply could not remain in the presence of light. This is why Jesus never spoke of healing in the sense we understand it. He spoke of revealing the truth that had been obscured by human belief. He lived in such a state of recognition that the illusions of the world, sickness, sin, fear, could not maintain their appearance in his presence. He was not performing miracles. He was witnessing reality, and so must we. For when we rest in inner stillness, when the personal self is quiet, when the mind is open, something remarkable begins to happen. The activity of God, which has been present all along, begins to shape itself in visible form. We do not direct this activity. We do not influence it. We do not instruct it. We simply behold it. Harmony flows because harmony is the nature of the presence. Supply flows because supply is the activity of the infinite. Peace flows because peace is the nature of spirit. Healing flows because wholeness is the truth of being. Guidance flows because divine intelligence is the mind of every individual life. None of these are added to you. They are revealed through you. And yet, let us be very clear. This revelation does not take place because you have uttered a sacred phrase, or because you have repeated a truth with conviction, or because you have summoned emotional intensity. It takes place because you have entered the stillness in which God is allowed to be God, where the presence is recognized. It manifests. Where it is unrecognized, it remains invisible, not absent, but unnoticed. Therefore, the entire secret of spiritual living is the cultivation of recognition, moment by moment, situation by situation, until the presence becomes the atmosphere in which you think, the ground upon which you walk, the life through which you live. And in that atmosphere, you will discover that things you once struggled with begin to resolve without effort. The people you feared begin to soften. Conditions you dreaded begin to shift. The burdens you carried begin to fall away, not because you have changed the world, but because you have changed your vision. Not because you have influenced the outer, but because you have recognized the inner. Harmony flows not from action, but from awareness, not from doing, but from being. This is the great mystery of the spiritual path. God acts through recognition, and recognition reveals harmony as the natural state of existence. In our next unfolding, we will see how this law can be applied in daily experiences, how we can walk through life with the quiet assurance that the presence goes before us, preparing the way, dissolving every appearance of discord before we meet it. Let us move gently into the practical aspect of our journey, not the practice of manipulating life, not the practice of fixing conditions, but the practice of recognition in the midst of ordinary human experience. For if the presence is truly infinite, if it is the substance, the law, and the life of all being, then it must be as present at the kitchen sink as in meditation, as present when paying bills, as when reading scripture, as present in conflict as in solitude. The spiritual life is not lived apart from daily experience. Daily experience becomes the temple in which the spiritual life is realized. Now, how do we proceed? Very quietly, very simply. We begin by withdrawing our dependence from anything external, not by abandoning our responsibilities, nor by ignoring the world, but by ceasing to look to persons, conditions, circumstances, or objects for what can come only from God. The moment we expect something from the outer, security, love, supply, peace, we have stepped away from the infinite and placed our trust in the finite. And so the first step is the recognition. There is no external source of good. God alone is the source, and God is within. Carry this recognition with you as you move through your day. When fear appears, you do not argue with it. You do not try to overcome it. You do not analyze it. You simply turn inward for a moment and remember, God is the only presence. Fear has no power because there is no power apart from God. And then you grow still, resting in that presence until the sense of fear begins to dissolve. It dissolves not because you conquered it, but because it has no law to sustain it. When lack or financial worry appears, do not try to think your way out. Do not rehearse possible solutions. Do not panic. Pause, turn within, become aware of the invisible. God is the substance of all form. There is no reality in lack, only the appearance. You rest in this knowing, not trying to produce supply, but remembering that supply is already flowing from the infinite as your life. And little by little, the fear begins to fade, replaced by a quiet assurance that the presence is fulfilling itself. Then, often without your intervention, opportunities open, needs are met, the way becomes clear. Not because you planned, but because you recognized. When you encounter difficult people, You do not attempt to change them. You do not resist, argue, or correct. Instead, remember, the Christ is the true identity of every individual. I will behold the Christ here, even if the human appearance suggests otherwise. And as you rest in that vision, the atmosphere shifts, perhaps not instantly, but inevitably, for no illusion can withstand the gaze of spiritual recognition. Often the outer relationship softens, or resolves, or simply ceases to trouble you when the body presents discomfort or disease. Again, you do not fight the condition. You do not engage in mental struggle. You do not demand healing. You withdraw inwardly and silently acknowledge there is one life, and that life is God. It is the life of this body. It is whole, complete, perfect. The appearance does not touch reality. You rest, you listen, you allow the presence to reveal itself. Healing then becomes an unveiling, not an achievement. It is the natural activity of divine life realized when confusion, indecision, or lack of direction arises. Become still. Do not force answers. Do not strain for clarity. Simply remember, God is the intelligence of my being. The solution already exists in consciousness. Then wait, quietly, receptively, and the way forward will reveal itself in its own time, not as a mental conclusion, but as an inner knowing, a gentle prompting, a sense of rightness. When the mind becomes agitated, busy, or overwhelmed, do not attempt to discipline it through force. Simply step back inwardly and remember, I of myself do nothing. The presence within is the activity of my mind. In that instant, even a moment of silence, the agitation begins to lose its hold. For the presence does not remove problems, it removes the false sense of self that believes it must solve them. The secret of daily practice. Little by little, you will discover that every circumstance of life becomes an invitation to turn inward, not to escape the world, but to see the world through spiritual vision. Every appearance becomes an opportunity to witness the law at work. Fear invites recognition of love. Lack invites recognition of substance. Discord invites recognition of peace. Illusion invites recognition of reality. And each time you choose recognition over reaction, you strengthen the atmosphere of your consciousness until you begin to walk through the world with a quiet inner knowing. The presence goes before me. The presence surrounds me. The presence is my life, my supply, my safety, my peace. This is not imagination. It is not wishful thinking. It is not autosuggestion. It is the truth. And as you live from it, your experience becomes aligned with it. In our next unfolding, we will take this one step deeper into the very heart of spiritual power, where we learn that the personal self has no role and that all demonstration is the activity of God alone. As we come now to a deeper level of our unfolding, let us approach this truth with great reverence, for we stand at the threshold of one of the most sacred revelations in the spiritual life. The world is filled with teachings about power, personal power, mental power, emotional power, willpower, psychic power. And in the pursuit of these, many have wandered far from the simplicity of the spiritual path. For in the realm of spirit, there is no personal power. There is no you who heals, no you who manifests, no you who commands spiritual forces. There is only God, and when this is understood not merely as a statement, but as an inner realization, the entire burden of life drops away. You see, all suffering arises from the sense that I, as a personal self, must do something. I must solve the problem. I must create the supply, I must make right decisions. I must heal the body. I must protect myself. I must secure my future. This is the great weariness of the human condition. It is the cause of fear, frustration, anxiety, and struggle. But all of this is built upon an illusion. The illusion that there is a selfhood apart from God, a selfhood with responsibilities, burdens, and powers of its own. Spiritual awakening begins the moment this illusion is seen through. Jesus expressed it perfectly. I can of mine own self do nothing. He did not say this in humility. He said it in truth. He spoke from the clear realization that the personal I is not the actor, not the healer, not the provider, not the source, the Father within, the presence, the infinite, the one is the only doer. This is the true meaning of spiritual power. Spiritual power is not something you acquire. It is not something you develop. It is not something you wield. Spiritual power is the activity of God expressing itself when the personal sense of I becomes silent. Imagine an electric lamp. The lamp does not produce the light. It does not generate it, invent it, or control it. It simply stands still, open, unobstructed, allowing the current to flow. The lamp does nothing but yield. So it is with you. Spiritual power flows only when the personal self yields, when you stop trying to make something happen and rest in the realization that God already is the life and law of your being. This yielding is not passive. It is not resignation. It is not fatalism. It is the highest form of spiritual activity. It is the recognition of the one presence in place of the many appearances. And the moment you yield the human sense of self, you become a transparency for the divine. This is why Goldsmith spoke so often of impersonalizing both good and evil. If you believe that good comes from you, or that evil can act upon you, you have accepted a universe of many powers. And in a universe of many powers, there can be no true peace. But in the universe of one, there is nothing to fear, nothing to resist, nothing to overcome. Spiritual power is the activity of this one invisible, silent, effortless, yet more real than anything the world can offer. Now, let us make this practical. When you are faced with a problem in body, in finances, in relationships, in work, do not attempt to bring spiritual power to the problem. Spiritual power does not act on conditions. Spiritual power acts in spite of conditions. This means that you take your attention off the problem entirely and turn within to the presence. You become still. You listen. You wait. You rest in the quiet knowing. This is not mine to solve. God is the life of this situation. The presence is already the fulfillment. I yield. And as you yield, the false sense of responsibility falls away, the mental noise gets, and the presence begins. Its activity, an activity that is always harmonious, always wise, always complete. You do not direct this activity. You do not try to shape it. You do not attempt to define the outcome. You stand still. You behold. You let. This is the secret of spiritual mastery. This is why the great mystics lived lives of extraordinary peace amidst worldly challenges. They knew that God is the only power and that the personal self has no role but to yield. This is the true meaning of Christ consciousness. The recognition that the I that lives you is not the mortal sense of self, but the infinite I, the presence that never slumbers, never falters, and never fails. As you enter more deeply into this realization, you will find that you are no longer striving. no longer forcing, no longer fearing, no longer calculating. You are living from an inner rest, an inner confidence, an inner assurance that needs no outward confirmation. For the presence itself becomes the activity of your mind, the strength of your body, the order of your affairs, the peace of your heart. This is spiritual power. God being God, through you, as you, for you. In our next unfolding, we will come to the closing revelation. The gentle, profound recognition that as we release personal identity and yield to the infinite, we enter into a life of peace, rest, and assured unfoldment. And now, beloved friends, we come to the quiet close of our time together, not a conclusion, not an ending, but a gentle resting place in the awareness we have allowed to unfold within us. For the spiritual life does not culminate in knowledge, nor in doctrine, nor in practice, but in realization, the simple, profound knowing that God is the only presence, the only power, the only life, the only selfhood of every individual being. If through this journey even one veil has been lifted, even one false sense dissolved, even one moment of stillness felt, then the work has begun. Not the work of self-improvement, nor the work of making something happen, but the sacred work of yielding to the presence that has always lived at the center of your being. Let us remember there is nothing to attain, there is nothing to strive for, there is nothing to become, there is only the recognition of what already is. Peace is not ahead of you. Peace is the nature of the I that lives you. Love is not something to receive. Love is the substance out of which you are formed. Harmony is not something to create. Harmony is the activity of God revealing itself through your consciousness. Healing is not the correction of a condition. Healing is the unveiling of reality. Everything you have sought, everything you have prayed for, everything you have struggled to achieve has been present within you from the beginning, waiting only for recognition. And now, in this quiet moment, let that recognition take its rightful place. Let your breath soften. Let the mind loosen its grip. Let the heart open, not upward, not outward, but inward, to the one who has never left, never changed, never faltered, never failed. Rest now in the peace of this awareness. The I that I am is God. The life that I live is God in expression. The mind through which I think is God's mind. The love through which I feel is God's love. And the peace in which I rest is God's own peace. Let this truth settle not as a thought, not as a belief, but as a presence. When Jesus said, "My peace I give unto you," he did not give a human peace dependent on circumstance. He gave the peace of one who knows no opposite, the peace that flows from the realization of oneness. Let that peace be yours now. Carry it gently into your day, into your relationships, into your work, into the smallest details of life. For wherever you walk, God walks. Wherever you speak, God speaks. Wherever you rest, God rests. Wherever you are, the presence is in all its fullness. And as you move forward, remember, it is not you who lives the spiritual life. It is the presence living itself was you. Surrender to that. Trust that. Rest in that, for in that surrender, all fear dissolves, all striving melts, all searching ends, and what remains is peace. The peace that passes understanding, the peace that needs no reason, the peace that simply is. Thank you, beloved friend, for walking this path with me, for opening your consciousness to truth, and for allowing the light within you to be recognized. You are never alone. You are never separate. You are never without guidance. The presence goes before you, walks beside you, lives within you, and expresses as you, now and forever. Rest in this peace. Live in this peace. Be this peace. This is the end of the outline, but it is the beginning of a life lived in realization. My friends, we gather here not to add another truth to the mind, nor to collect ideas with which to improve the human scene, but to behold a spiritual principle that has been true from the beginning and will remain true to the end of time. If you have ever felt distant from God, if you have believed that God was somewhere beyond your reach, or if you have struggled to find the presence that seems always one step away, I want you to know that there is only one reason for this sense of separation, and it is not because God is absent, nor because you have failed, nor because you have not prayed enough or studied enough. The only barrier, the only veil, is the universal belief in two powers, the belief that there is God on one side and something unlike God on the other. The moment that belief is accepted, even unconsciously, you step out of the awareness of heaven and into the realm of appearances. You begin to battle with shadows, to treat the world of effect as though it possessed power, and to search for God as though he were not the very life that animates your being. The infinite way stands on a single foundation. There are not two powers. There is only one. One presence, one power, one life, spiritual, invisible, indivisible, and everything that has seemed to oppose you, frighten you, or threaten you has had its existence only in the imagination that believes in a power apart from God. Today, as we move deeper into this hour, let us be willing to release every notion that the world, the body, the mind, or any circumstance has authority over us. Let us come with empty hands, empty thoughts, willing hearts, prepared to discover that separation has never existed, and that the presence we seek is the very essence of our own being. When this truth dawns, even faintly, the entire structure of fear begins to dissolve. For you cannot fear that which has no power, and you cannot be separated from that which is the substance of your life. And so we begin with this simple but profound recognition: there is only God. And nothing stands beside God to oppose, resist, or diminish the infinite. In this realization, the search ends, the struggle ends, and the journey home begins, not outward, but inward, to the kingdom that is already here. Now, let us look more deeply at how this sense of separation ever arose, for the infinite itself knows nothing of division, nothing of conflict, nothing of opposing forces. Therefore, anything that claims such existence must originate not in spirit, but in the human mind. From the moment human consciousness began to interpret life through the five senses, a great misunderstanding took root. The belief that what is seen, heard, touched, tasted, or smelled has authority, substance, and power. And because these impressions are many, the mind concluded that power is many. It saw health and disease, success and failure, love and hate, abundance and lack, and it believed that each pair represented two opposing realities. But, my friends, the moment you accept that appearance has power, you have unknowingly declared that something stands beside God, and in that single instant, the world becomes a battlefield rather than a garden. The body becomes a power, the economy becomes a power, weather becomes a power, people become powers for good or for harm, and you begin to live between forces that push and pull you. This is the birth of what we call the illusion, not because appearances do not seem real, but because they have no life of their own. The human mind, unaware of the one invisible presence that forms all being, divides the indivisible and then fears the shadows it has created. But spirit knows no such division. Spirit knows only its own infinite, harmonious expression. So as long as you identify with the human mind and its judgments, you will experience life as a conflict of powers. But the moment you turn inward, even slightly, you begin to sense that beneath the appearance is a single, undivided life, moving in perfect order. You begin to see that disease does not oppose health, for both are mental images imposed upon the one spiritual body. You begin to see that lack does not oppose supply, for both are interpretations of the one spiritual storehouse. The human mind divided the indivisible, but consciousness, your true self, remains forever whole. And until this is recognized, you will continue to fight phantoms, never realizing that the battle ends the moment you refuse to grant power to anything external. So we begin to awaken by questioning the very thing the world takes for granted, the belief that anything has power apart from God. This recognition is the first crack in the shell of separation. It is the beginning of freedom. When the Master said, "I can of my own self do nothing," he was not speaking from humility, nor offering a poetic phrase to inspire future generations. He was revealing the fundamental law upon which all spiritual power rests. For the human sense of I, the personal, striving, fearful, self-defending identity, is the very one that believes in two powers. It is this sense of I that worries, reacts, resists, fights, achieves, and suffers. And it is this I that stands outside the kingdom, forever trying to enter through effort. But the true I, the I that existed before Abraham, the I that is the life of every individual, is the very presence of God expressing itself. And so, when Jesus proclaimed he could do nothing of himself, he was declaring the utter impotence of the personal self and the absolute sufficiency of the infinite invisible that lived as his being. This is the point at which the spiritual path truly begins. When you stop expecting the human mind to accomplish what only spirit can do, when you recognize that your personal thoughts, calculations, fears, and desires cannot heal, cannot prosper, cannot harmonize, cannot save, in that moment, the burden shifts from the shoulders of the finite to the freedom of the infinite. You begin to see that every attempt to fix life through personal will only strengthens the illusion of separation. The more you try to be strong, the more you affirm weakness. The more you try to manipulate conditions, the more reality you give to the conditions themselves. But when you rest in the truth that the personal sense of I has no power, no wisdom, no capacity to act, you make way for the one power to reveal itself. You begin to experience what the Master meant when he said, "The Father within me, he doeth the works." This does not diminish you, it liberates you. It releases you from the impossible task of managing the universe and restores you to your rightful place as a transparency through which the infinite shines. And so, the most powerful realization you can ever come to is this: nothing is expected of you as a human being, for the human is not the doer of spiritual works. Your function is not effort. Your function is recognition. The moment you shift from the personal I to the divine I, you stand at the threshold of true spiritual power, where the works are done through you, not by you. And in that awareness, fear dissolves, for you are no longer a separate being facing a hostile world. You are the presence of God expressing itself as you. And now we come to an illustration so simple that the human mind will overlook it, yet so profound that it can dissolve years of fear in a single moment of recognition. Consider your hand. This hand can comfort or it can strike. It can give or withhold. It can build or destroy. And yet the hand itself has no power. It is neither good nor bad. It is neither moral nor immoral. It is neither creative nor destructive. All that the hand appears to do is but the expression of the consciousness that animates it. If the consciousness is loving, the hand expresses love. If the consciousness is fearful, the hand expresses fear. The hand is an effect. Consciousness alone is the cause, and so it is with every condition of life, every circumstance, every appearance. Nothing in the world of form has power. No body, no disease, no bank account, no person, no weather, no government, no event. These are but hands, so to speak, effects without inherent authority. But the moment you begin to treat these effects as causes, you have stepped into the illusion of two powers. You begin to fear what the body can do, what money can do, what people can do, what circumstances can do. You no longer see that the only real power is the invisible presence that forms, maintains, and sustains all being. You see, my friends, the hand cannot lift itself, cannot move itself, cannot choose itself. It is moved by something deeper. In the same way, no condition can act of its own nature, no appearance can control your life, no external circumstance can dictate your experience unless you grant it the power your consciousness alone possesses. The moment you say, "This condition frightens me," you have given power to the shadow. The moment you say, "This problem has authority," you have forgotten the source. But when you look at any appearance and quietly realize, this has no power, it is neither good nor bad, it is only an effect, you withdraw the belief that sustains the illusion. You return to the awareness of the invisible cause, the I that moves all creation, and in that recognition, the appearance begins to dissolve, not because you changed the effect, but because you withdrew the false belief that gave it life. All healing, all harmony, all peace is found the moment you stop fighting shadows and turn instead to the source. For the cause is God, the infinite invisible, and the effect is only the outer picture, and the outer picture has no power in itself, none. The moment this becomes clear even slightly, the entire drama of fear and struggle begins to fall away, for you see that nothing external has ever had authority over the one who lives as your very being. Now, having seen that the appearance has no power, and the cause is always the invisible presence, we must understand the most difficult and yet most liberating principle of spiritual living. Never resist a problem. The world teaches resistance. Fight the illness, fight the lack, fight the circumstance, fight the person. But the moment you resist, you have declared another power. You have affirmed that something stands beside God, capable of acting in opposition to the infinite. Resistance is the birth of fear, and fear is always the admission of two powers. In the infinite way, we meet every appearance not with resistance, but with recognition. When a problem presents itself, be it a pain in the body, a disturbance in the home, a fear in the mind, you do not rush to fix it. You do not analyze it. You do not hold it as real in and of itself. Instead, you turn inward and silently remember, this has no power, only God is power. In that stillness, you withdraw the belief that sustains the appearance. The body may be screaming for attention, the mind may be pleading for solutions, the world may be demanding immediate action, but the spiritual response is always the same. Be still, turn within, and recognize the one presence. You are not ignoring the human picture. You are seeing through it. You are refusing to grant power to the effect. You are lifting the entire situation into the light of spiritual awareness. And as you do, something very sacred occurs. The appearance begins to lose its reality, not because you have forced it away, but because you have ceased to feed it with fear. When you stand in non-resistance, you stand where Christ stood, resting in the assurance that the Father within doeth the works. This is why Jesus never argued with a condition, never struggled with it, never fought with it. He simply recognized the perfection of God where the world saw imperfection. And in that recognition, the appearance dissolved of its own weightlessness. The moment you resist nothing, you discover that nothing external can harm you, influence you, or bind you, because nothing external has power. Instead, you meet every situation with a quiet inner confidence, the recognition that the infinite, invisible, the presence within, is the only activity, the only law, the only life operating anywhere. And as this becomes your practice, you begin to find that problems lose their urgency. They no longer terrify you, because you know that nothing can oppose the one presence that lives your very being. In non-resistance, you are lifted into spiritual authority, not the authority of domination, but the authority of truth recognized. And from that awareness, harmony unfolds naturally, without effort, without struggle, without fear, because the only power that ever was is now consciously acknowledged as your life. Many years ago, when students first began coming to me for help, I quickly discovered something remarkable. Healings did not occur because we changed the condition, nor because we applied some mental force to overcome it, but because even for a brief moment, the individual or the practitioner caught a glimpse of the truth that there is only one power. I remember a woman who came with a long-standing physical ailment, one that had been treated, analyzed, and feared for many years. She fully believed the condition had power, power to limit her, power to frighten her, power to determine her experience. But as we sat together in silence, I did not treat the disease. I did not speak to the body. I did not attempt to change the outward form. I simply rested in the awareness that God alone is power, and the body, being an effect, has none. In that stillness, a shift occurred, not in the body first, but in her consciousness. She later said, "For the first time, I sensed that the problem had no reality of its own, and within days the appearance dissolved like a shadow fading before the sun." The healing came not from effort, but from the dissolution of the belief in two powers. And there was a businessman, overwhelmed by financial pressures that seemed insurmountable. Every letter that arrived, every bill, every conversation reinforced his conviction that circumstances possessed power over him. But when he learned to sit quietly and recognize that supply is not in money, not in clients, not in employment, but in the infinite invisible expressing as his consciousness, the entire picture changed. The moment he stopped fearing conditions and began acknowledging the one source operating as his life, opportunities appeared where none had existed before. Nothing in the outer world caused the change. The change occurred in consciousness, and the outer simply mirrored the inner. And I recall a family torn by conflict, each person convinced that another held the power to wound them. But when even one member of that family began to see the others, not as separate egos, but as expressions of the one life, the tension began to dissolve. It was not a matter of human reconciliation. It was the recognition that there is only one self-appearing as many. The moment duality was dropped, harmony revealed itself. You see, my friends, these are not miracles in the human sense. They are the natural outcome of spiritual law. When you stop feeding the illusion with belief, the illusion cannot stand. When you refuse to grant power to conditions, conditions lose their authority. When you accept the truth of one power only, you stand in the same consciousness that healed the sick, raised the dead, and stilled the storm, not because you do anything, but because you have returned to the reality that nothing exists to oppose the infinite. These stories are not meant to inspire you with hope. They are meant to reveal a principle. The moment you withdraw your belief in a second power, harmony begins to unfold of its own accord, not through effort, not through struggle, but through the simple recognition of truth. But when he learned to sit quietly and recognize that supply is not in money, not in clients, not in employment, but in the infinite invisible expressing as his consciousness, the entire picture changed. The moment he stopped fearing conditions and began acknowledging the one source operating as his life, opportunities appeared where none had existed before. Nothing in the outer world caused the change. The change occurred in consciousness, and the outer simply mirrored the inner. The practice is simple, but not easy for the human mind, for it asks nothing of the mind and everything of the spirit. You begin by becoming still, truly still, without words, without requests, without the desire to change, heal, improve, or achieve. You sit, not to speak, but to listen, not to think, but to be receptive. And as you enter that stillness, you acknowledge silently, gently, almost as a whisper within yourself, there is only one presence here. There is only one power. You are not trying to make something true. You are not forcing a spiritual thought. You are merely recognizing what already is. Then you rest in that awareness. You do not hurry the silence. You do not watch the clock. You do not wait for a result. And now, my friends, we come to the heart of spiritual living, the practice through which the truth of one power becomes not merely something we believe, but something we experience. For truth, until it is felt within, remains only a statement. It has no transforming influence. It is through the conscious practice of the presence that the illusion of duality gradually dissolves and the one power becomes the living reality of our being. While working, you remember, there is no power in the outer world. All power is within. When a disturbance arises, you do not immediately react. You withdraw into the inner sanctuary and allow the one presence to bear witness for itself. This practice is not for moments of crisis alone. It must be lived through the small, ordinary tasks of daily life, until the recognition of the one becomes natural, spontaneous, unforced. Slowly the mind's habit of fearing appearances weakens. Slowly the reflex of reacting to conditions fades. You find that your first impulse is no longer to fix, but to observe. No longer to struggle, but to rest. No longer to resist, but to recognize. This is the practice of the presence, returning again and again to the inner awareness that God is, and nothing stands beside God. And in this practice, the old sense of a separate, vulnerable self begins to dissolve, and the truth dawns. The one power is not merely with you, it is your own being, living itself as your life. This realization cannot be forced, but it comes naturally to the heart that consistently turns inward, listens deeply, and rests in silent receptivity. As this realization of one power deepens, something remarkable begins to occur, not through effort or discipline, but through the natural activity of spirit in your consciousness. Life itself changes. You will discover that fear begins to lose its foundation, for fear is always the product of believing that something outside you has power. When you no longer grant that power, the emotion has nothing to attach itself to, and it simply fades. You will notice that the anxieties you once carried about, health, finances, relationships, or future events, do not grip you as they once did. It is not that you have become careless or indifferent, but that you sense more deeply each day that the infinite invisible governs all things without your supervision. And as this trust becomes your way of being, you will find that the body responds with greater harmony because you are no longer holding it in fear. Supply begins to appear without struggle because you are no longer affirming lack as a power. Relationships soften and heal because you no longer see another as an opposing presence, but as the same one life shining through a different form. You will also observe that your reactions change. Where you once might have defended, argued, or resisted, you now meet the moment with quietness because you know that nothing external can impose itself upon the one presence. When you walk into your day, you feel less like a human being trying to manage life and more like an instrument through which life reveals itself. Even ordinary tasks acquire a sense of grace, for you begin to see that every action, washing dishes, speaking with a friend, answering a letter, is the movement of the one appearing as activity. You discover a joy that does not depend on circumstances, a peace that does not depend on outcomes, a freedom that does not depend on the human picture. This is not the peace the world gives, which is always conditional. It is the peace that comes from knowing that nothing stands outside of God, nothing threatens God, and therefore nothing can threaten you. For you and the Father are one. As duality dissolves, you find yourself living from the inside out, no longer pushed or pulled by appearances, but guided from within by a presence that is always wise, always loving, always sufficient unto every moment. This is the beginning of true spiritual living, where life unfolds not by your plans, but by the quiet, steady revelation of the one that lives your life for you. And so, my friends, as we come to the close of this hour together, let us gather the thread of our journey and return once more to the simple truth upon which all spiritual realization rests. There is only one presence, one power, one life, and that one is the very essence of your own being. Whatever fears you have carried, whatever doubts have followed you, whatever burdens have weighed upon your heart, all of these arise from the belief that something exists apart from God, something with power to influence your good. But now you know that this was never so. Separation was never a fact, only a belief. Duality was never a condition, only a thought. And the moment that belief dissolves, even faintly, the light of your true identity begins to shine through, revealing a presence that has never left you, a love that has never wavered, a life that has never been threatened. From this moment forward, let your practice be simple. Do not struggle with truth. Do not try to force spiritual realization. Instead, pause throughout your day and quietly remember, there is only one presence here. Nothing stands beside it. Let this recognition become the gentle undercurrent of all your activities. When challenges arise, let your first response be inward. Father, thou art the only power. When joys appear, let your gratitude flow to the invisible source, that alone is the giver of all good. And above all, rest in the assurance that the one power that governs the universe is the very life living as you. There is nothing to achieve, nothing to attain, nothing to reach. There is only the unveiling of what has always been true. In this awareness, you walk in the world not as a struggling human being, but as a transparency through which the grace of God shines unhindered. And as this realization grows, your presence becomes a blessing without your effort, a quiet healing influence wherever you stand. So let us part for now with this simple remembrance. You and the Father are one, And in that oneness lies all peace, all safety, all fulfillment. Return to it often, rest in it deeply, and let the one presence reveal itself as your life, your mind, your being. And as you do, you will discover that the journey is not toward God, but from God, the one living its own life as you,